Hey, Martin here, and welcome to episode 6 of my advanced modding series. And this episode will be about TileEntities, and it's a very exciting subject. It will allow us to do many things. So let's get started. So let's first set a goal. Our goal for today's episode is to make a block which will act as a mine. So you can place down the block, and after a certain period it will activate itself and it will explode as soon as a entity gets close. Now, another feature we want to add to this mine is that it can camouflage itself, so we can right click it with a item and it will turn into that item. So there are two reasons why we need TileEntities here, or a TileEntity here. Reason one is because we can use TileEntities to tick logic, so for every world tick we can do some logic. And two, we can use TileEntities to save, theoretically, infinite amounts of data. You can use blocks to save data, but that's limited, and it's limited to 16 states using metadata. I haven't covered metadata yet, and I'm not planning to, frankly, because they are being removed in 1.8. So I might do a tutorial on block states when we're going to move to 1.8, but for now we're going to skip it. So what are TileEntities? Well, TileEntities are, you might have heard from them, they are basically block entities, and the idea is that blocks that need extra data, so like chests, so any inventory basically, and more, they can use a TileEntity to store that information and do certain logic if they need to. So like a piston is a TileEntity. For every position in the world there is a TileEntity instance. So this is different from how blocks are being handled. As we can see, every block only has one instance of it, and if you set a block, you do set block and you use the existing instance. You don't create a new instance for every block you place. So that's the difference between blocks, and that's the reason, by the way, why you can't store data in this block class. So you could do something like private int timer and use that timer to keep track of how long this this is a Dutch flag, but if it was a mine, you could create a countdown timer before it will get armed, basically. But you couldn't do that because there's only one timer variable per world, well, even per instance. So you couldn't do that because there's only one instance, and so there's only one timer. So this is really into object-oriented programming, but that's how it is. So if we're going to do a TileEntity, let's get started. So a TileEntity is connected to a block, so we're still going to create a block class. But my plan is to create a block advanced mod TileEntity class, which basically is the same as this one. So it's a base block class, but this one extends block container. Now if we go into block container, oops, do that, and it's probably going to yell for that. Okay. So if you're going to go in block container, you'll see it just extends the block, but it also implements TileEntity provider. Now we could have chosen to use our existing base block class and implement TileEntity provider. However, you also need to add some more things like removing a TileEntity and do this. I personally chose to go for this method, which is extending block container and creating a new base class. So you'll see it as a normal block class apart from this method that needs to be implemented because it's an abstract method, and that's this TileEntity. So create TileEntity, and it's pretty self-explanatory. This is a metadata which we aren't going to go into, but we can return a TileEntity. We're going to return a new instance of a certain TileEntity. So all this talk about TileEntities, let's create a TileEntity. For that we're going to create a new package. I like to keep the packages the same as how Minecraft has structured the packages. So if we look at this, we can see there's a TileEntity package as well over here, which contains all the TileEntities, and you see that every TileEntity class has TileEntity prefix. I like to do that as well. So we're going to add a new TileEntity. We're going to do new class, and we do TileEntity camo mine, and let's extend TileEntity. Oh, and I forgot something. This is our base class, not our camo mine block class. That's an important difference. So we can make this an abstract class, so Java will be fine. Our compiler will... no, you're abstract. There you go. And let's create a new block class called block camo mine and extend block advanced not TileEntity. Okay. And we created a TileEntity camo mine. We can do return new. So you basically always want to do this. You want to return a new instance of this TileEntity. Now we could leave it like this. We could do something similar as the flag. And I've created a entry over here already, because you know how to do that, so I didn't want to bother you with that. And we're going to keep using the same texture as the Dutch flag, because frankly I'm just too lazy to create a new texture for it, and the camo mine will be able to be camouflaged, so why bother adding a texture, right? And doesn't need random ticks. So that's that, and let's register the block while we're at it. So we go to mod blocks and prepare this as well, and also register the block. Okay, so that's that. We've got a basic block, we've got a basic TileEntity. Apart from one thing, the TileEntity needs to be registered, so let's do that. For that I'd like to add a new class to the init package. And do a public static void init. And we need to do game registry, register TileEntity. And we do the TileEntity camo mine class, and now we need to give it an ID. So the ID is quite similar to how block IDs work over here, and we could add an entry for that in here. Could make this final as well. String camo mine. And let's do difference between this registry name and the TileEntity registry name is that with the block registry name, Forge will automatically add the mod ID to the front of this name before it will be actually registered. So that way you never will get any name collisions with other mods. However, with this registry that isn't the case, so I recommend to add your mod ID at the front of this. So we could do reference mod ID plus, let's do colon and do camo mine. So you can use it over here. Names, TileEntities, camo mine. And we also need to call this init. And we do that. Doesn't really matter that much, at least in the pre-init. Let's do it over here. There we go. So let's try to start it up. And let's do give player advanced mod camo mine. And you'll see it works. It doesn't crash at least. Now you can't really prove there's a TileEntity unless you grab a piston. And it shouldn't be able to move it. And it isn't. So that's pretty safe to say it works. Now let's try if we can make it explode after a short time maybe. That's our first step. So what we can do, we can use this TileEntity camo mine to store our data. So we can put in a timer variable. And we can make it, let's make it 3 seconds. So 60 ticks to 20 ticks in a second, so this is 3 seconds. Now there's a method in the TileEntity class. There are a few, but not too many methods. And one of those is update entity. There we go. And by default it's empty, but we can use it over here. And update entity is a method that will be called every tick on both client and server side. So we can do timer minus minus, and if the timer equals 0, we can create an explosion. Another neat thing of a TileEntity is it contains a world object, an X, a Y, and a Z coordinate. So that's pretty similar to how normal entities work. They also have a world object and their X, Y, and Z coordinate, though this is a int and the other was a double. Because this is a block position and the other was, the entity position is just a non-block position. So with this we can create an explosion. We've done this before. And also remember to only create an explosion on the server. So we can do world object is remote, is not remote, and then do a no entity has created explosion. We can do X coord, Y coord, Z coord, the explosion size. So that's from a creeper, and we want to destroy blocks. Now, and this is one is a float. Now this is an explosion at the bottom corner of the block. Let's show it. This should work already, actually. But this is in the bottommost corner of the block. We could create an explosion in the middle of the block, and then you need to do this to make that work. So now, 3 seconds after we place down the TileEntity, boom, we get an explosion. But that's not a mine, obviously, but that's just to show that how to save data. Now let's do something like this. 1, 2, and log out. And when I log in, you would think it would explode right after I log in, but that wasn't the case if you count correctly. And if that isn't really clear, I could do something like log.info and print the timer, and you'll see that happen. So we see it counting down. If we only half a second left. If I log out and log back in, you'll see it counting down from 3 seconds again. And this is because this timer variable wasn't saved. We need to save it to well, it basically needs to be written to the world when you close your Minecraft. So there's a write and read from MBT. MBT is something Parmar has discussed already. You could look at his video for that. And we are going to work with it right now. So we're going to call this a tag and do that. And first of all, we want to do a super for both of these, because we, like you can see in the super implementation, you can see that the X, Y, and Z coordinate is stored of this entity and also its ID. We definitely don't want to not do that. So with that out of the way, we want to save the timer. Now there are a lot of things you can use in tag, a lot of methods. You get a lot of gets of primitive types, and also other compound tags. Well, Parmar's discussed those already. So let's just do it. Basically, in read from MBT, you're reading from the world. So the tag has certain data, and we need to read it from the tag onto the timer. So to do that, we can do a timer equals tag get integer. We should give it some name. Let's call it timer. I'd like to name my strings in here the same as how the variables are called. And in write to MBT, you're going to save the world basically. So you need to save this state onto the tag. So we do tag.set integer. And use the same tag, that's very important. So that way the tag compound knows which key to look for. And then do the timer. Now if we restart Minecraft, this should work. So let's log out half a second and log back in, and we should get a boom right away. There we go. So that's more like it. So when you're countering bugs that involve data to be missing when you relog, something is up with these methods. So look out for those. Now this just explodes after 3 seconds, so that isn't really a mine, is it? Let's turn it around. So this timer will keep track of when to prime this this mine. So after 3 seconds we will prime it, and we can get rid of this log, and we can do, if the timer is more than 0, then decrease it. And when it's 0 and we're at the server, then we should look if there's an entity nearby. So how can we do that? Where the best thing to find your solution for this is to think of where Minecraft itself looks at or needs this information. And I'd like to look at the mob spawner, because the mob spawner doesn't spawn any more mobs when there are more than a certain amount to prevent like lag. And a mob spawner, as it turns out to be, is a TileEntity. So we can see a mob spawner, and you'll see that it contains not that much info, not all the info we would expect it to have, and that's because it basically forwards everything to a mob spawner based logic instance, which has all the logic. So if we look at this, we can see update spawner. So okay, spawn lay, blah blah blah. There we go. I think I've got it. Get entities within AABB. AABB stands for Axis Aligned Bounding Box, which basically means a certain box which is axis aligned. So we can use that. We can get certain entities within a certain box, and this probably is the box. So we could use that. It's in the world, we can see. So it's get entities within AABB. Returns all the entities of the specified class type which intersects with the AABB. Okay. So we could do a... I know already we're going to get a list of all entities. So let's do that. And do entities equals world object get entities within AABB. And let's only check for players. So that's what that class was. That parameter. Specified class type. So we only say entity player. And then the axis aligned bounding box. You could look back in the mob spawner logic, but it basically gets a axis aligned bounding box by doing get bounding box, and then giving it these 6 parameters. So basically your one point of the box and another point of the box. So let's do that. And let's try the x coordinates -1, the y coordinates -1, the z coordinates -1, and I'll show in a sec what that means. Plus -1. It's valid, but don't need. And let's make that +2 actually. And that +2, that's basically for the same reason as why you would do +0.5 for the explosion, because x coord points towards the corner of the block, and we want to check symmetrically or to the mine. We'll see what that means in a second. Oh, and we get a list of all entities. So our one tiny step to make is if entities size is more than 0, if we have more than one entity in the area, we can create an explosion. Oh, I still need a closing bracket. Whoops, I dropped something up. Oh, that's just the hot code debugger that failed because it mentioned a uncompiled, or it mentioned a compile error which we resolved while Minecraft was loading. So now it should work. So this should be rigged, but we can just check. If we come close, there we go, boom. And if we get close right when we place down, it won't do anything. You can see that right here. I can just walk around it and then go away. There we go, that's more like a mine, isn't it? So how does that work? If we just place down the piston where this mine would be. The area it checks for is basically, let's show it using stone. So this is the area it checks for, and there you go, that's the area it checks for. I can show that by doing that. It shouldn't explode if I get close. But if I jump in this spot, there we go. So if you look at the XYZ coordinate we mentioned, so let's say again this is the mine. I don't want to blow it up. If you look at the XYZ coordinates, it will, the corner of that block will be, you can look at that right in this corner right here. So if we increase that one by, if we want to create a box from there to there. So if we subtract 1 from here, we get this position over here. And if we do that for every axis, we get over here. So we get in this corner basically. Now if we add one to every axis, we get over here, even though we want to go over this corner. So that's why we do +2 for every axis. Time flew with this one. We're at 30 minutes already. So next time I'll come back and show you how to add the camouflage for this mine, and we'll also go into how to interact with the block using inventory. So you can use like buildcraft pipes or transfer nodes or whatever, or hoppers, to dynamically change the camouflage of the block. So see you all next week, and bye bye.